Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you very much for joining me here today. This is your one-stop shop for cryptocurrency analysis, among other things. Now we're taking a closer look at BNB here today. Now I want to thank you to my community, my Patreon subscribers, for recommending I cover this. Really appreciate you and thank you. Moving forward, I'm not a financial advisor. This is for educational purposes only. Always do your own research. And if you could, of course, please feel free to reference my Telegram community as well as my Discord channel and my Patreon if you'd like to consider showing your support. There's also $25 in Bitcoin down below available through Voyager. Reference that in your own time. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get right to it. All right, folks, let's go ahead and take a look at Binance. And this is Binance Coin, and it seems fitting to use the Binance desktop application. So just know that's the application that I use. This is my PC, not a mobile device. I use TradingView within too, and that is found in the top right-hand corner. So if you see up here, just click on TradingView. That's how you enable it. So if you'd like to follow along, I have the 50 and the 200-day moving average, the simple moving averages enabled, and you just select that under indicators. Okay. But let's go ahead and look at Bitcoin first. All right. We always look at a baseline to see what's going on in the market because Bitcoin and Ethereum are the two major currencies, and I think it's helpful to kind of understand how they're both reacting. Just kind of see how they influence these other altcoins. Right. So Bitcoin first, we are looking at the 4-hour chart, and this is the 4-hour chart. So every line here signifies, basically 4 hours of time. Right. So we got all these candlesticks here. And just something to note, you can see the price is currently rejecting, but also kind of holding at the 50-day moving average. Let me zoom in a little bit there. You see this yellow line, this is the 50-day moving average. That's a pretty common indicator. That's why I use the 200 and the 50, because that's what all the industry standards are set as. In other words, all the other indicators are going to be using that with, say the bots and the large scale industry traders. They're all using the 200 and the 50. So look at the 50 here, you can see, obviously it was working as a support level previously for about 2 days, and now for the last two and a half days, we've got major resistance. But look, it came up and it's tested 3 times, and it looks like it's going to try to break through. So that's a very good sign. If we can break above the 50, likely the price will continue to trend upwards and will come back up to the 42,000 range in due time. May or may not happen, hard to say. Bitcoin has a tendency of surprising us a lot lately, but that is potential. Right, so this is kind of a good sign at this point. I like this testing and currently tentatively holding above. Right, bar has to close above that. Until it does, there's really no sense in presuming, but that's kind of what we're looking at there. Furthermore, we have again major resistance at 42,000. Don't even worry about the 200-day moving average. It's pretty far away at this point, trending down. It may eventually intersect, and what we're hoping for is obviously the 50 to come swinging back up. And that is a golden cross. That's a very good sign for a support leading into the 200. We're a ways off from that, but all good things right now with Bitcoin. Ethereum, similar scenario, only just slightly more elevated. Because as you may already know, Ethereum has a tendency of doing better than Bitcoin. When Bitcoin sells off, Ethereum essentially steps in place and takes off, right? That's what we saw back here. Bitcoin is in straight consolidation right here this entire 7 to 10 days. And just out of nowhere, of course, it lost because Bitcoin sold off massively and people were concerned. But generally speaking, when Bitcoin goes sideways, Ethereum usually goes up, right? It's kind of the way that it works. So looking at this here, you can see it is increasing. It's going up, of course. It's over the 50-day moving average, so we're in good shape there. But we do have a rough estimate of a resistance level at 3,100. Furthermore, too, I need to mark this here for you. We do have a resistance level at roughly 2889. We could round up and say about 2,900, 2,900 for that. Okay. So that's Bitcoin and Ethereum. Now let's look at BNB and see how it's performing. Now, as you can see here, this is the 1-day chart. So we always start with the 1 day and work our way down. I think it's important to get a big picture, a bird's eye view, before we go into a smaller, more cellular level, right? So looking at this here, what do you see that's interesting? Well, a very, very terrible sell-off here on the 18th. And that was the China candle. At least it's easy to describe it as such, right? That's when China had the Bitcoin issues, so to speak. And, obviously the price came down. You can see it blasted through the 50-day moving average. These moving averages really don't matter when those things happen. So honestly, not a big deal. The 200 was tested and rejected, however. So I guess there's that. But I don't put a lot of weight into the 1-day chart with these moving averages personally. just based on what happened recently. Normally they're very reliable, but generally speaking, when you have a major sell-off from Bitcoin, I mean, it lost 55% in 6 weeks, there is obviously something going on, right? So that causes to happen. But as you can see here, if we look back at the 17th, this is the first sell-off from Bitcoin, and BNB did well, ramped up again. And it ramped up even prior to that as well. So all in all, BNB has a tendency of doing very well when Bitcoin does poorly. So just kind of try to remember that, kind of understand that. Everything got completely reset and wiped out recently. I mean, pretty much all the best altcoins have a almost identical type of movement, right? Major sell-off, tried to increase, Bitcoin hit its resistance, rejected, and everything else went down again. So it's not abnormal to see this, right? But that's essentially what's influencing BNB at this time. We do have a lot more volume here recently, which is good. Kind of a pickup in volume. Got some green bars there, which is nice. RSI is still at a very low sub 45 level. And anything under 45, you see it's kind of imaginary resistance level. That is kind of staying there now. Hopefully we will see the RSI break up over 45, and that would essentially give us that bullish momentum we're looking for. MACD is also planning to swing up above 2 here. If we can get 2 or 3 more green days, and the price comes up over, just say 400, then we're going to be in really good shape, because it does appear, I'll just mark that quickly, that 390 is a pretty strong resistance. Has been tested 4 times. So expect that to be tested here soon. So that's the 1-day chart. Look at the 4-hour now. Again, pretty much telling us the same story, only it's a shorter time frame, right? So things are a little bit more exaggerated. So that being said, we have the RSI kind of fair to middle and right in the center. The MACD is essentially just telling us there's a state of indecision. It's more so consolidating right now, which is pretty standard considering we're just waiting on Bitcoin to make up its mind. Is it going to break 42,000? Is it going to stay above the 50-day moving average? We will hopefully find that out soon. But just note that BNB has a tentative resistance at about 390, and that is again the 4-hour chart. Looking at the 1 hour, I don't typically do this. I usually like to just bounce between the 4-hour and the 15 because I'm more of a, I either do a very short day trade, or I jump to more of kind of a longer swing trade. So it really just depends on my mood, of course, but with the 1 hour chart, you can kind of see a very similar scenario here. MACD is looking kind of looks like it's trying to shift into bearish sentiment, but it's really not, because the MACD is looking good. The RSI is also pretty high, so I wouldn't really say there's any trouble with this. 1 hour chart looks pretty good. All the right indicators are nice too. Both the 200 and the 50-day moving average are traveling below the price, so they're currently working as support levels. Okay, so just kind of be mindful of that. Now the 15-minute chart is my favorite. I'm going to want to use this here more appropriately, more consistently when I'm taking entry. In fact, it's probably my go-to. Unless I'm strictly doing day trading, there's really no other point in not using the 15-minute chart. You pretty much have to and should always use this, because it gives you the best confirmation, right? And confirmation is key when taking entry. You don't want to just arbitrarily jump into a position and just kind of, go for it. You're gambling at that point. Good traders don't gamble, right? I know it's easy to do and just say, FOMO in and have some fun and say, I don't care if I lose it. That's okay if you have that mentality. But if you're a good trader and a smart trader, you're treating this like a business, and you're not just jumping in randomly without confirmation. So for me, confirmation is 2 solid green bars above the support level, right? So let's go ahead and establish that first here. Let's see if there's any support levels. And first thing I do too is I just disable the moving averages. I think the simple moving averages are less effective on shorter time frames. They're more effective the longer time frame you look out, right? So the 1 day or the 1 week is going to carry much more weight than an actual 15-minute or a 1-minute chart would. So I always disable those first. Second thing I do is I enable my VWAP line, which is by far my favorite indicator in the industry. And the reason why is because it tells us what the volume is in the last 24 hours expressed as a price. Okay, so this blue bar is basically telling us that the price right now is roughly $3 lower, or correction, the price is roughly $3 higher than where it should be based on the average. Okay, so in other words, it works as a support and resistance level, right? So instead of constantly drawing new support and resistance lines, we can literally just use this as a potential support and resistance. Okay, so the price action was below, that worked as a resistance, now it's above, it's likely going to be a support. And if you can see here too, let me zoom in a little bit for you. There's 2 solid green bars that closed above the VWAP line. That's the confirmation I typically like to look for. So hypothetically, this would be a good entry point. Again, you don't ever want to use that on its own. There's other things you want to use in combination, but that is a good starting point to identify that, hey, we are looking good. That's a good entry point, and this is something I want to pay close attention to, right? But just generally speaking, if you're going to use it, you can see that, look, it came up here, came down, bounced off of the VWAP line, continued up, lost VWAP. It kind of works, again, as a strong support and resistance level. Anyway, let's move on. I want to show you the EMA line because this is another thing you want to use in conjunction with the VMA. Correction, the VWAP, VMA, this isn't the words. So the VWAP and the EMA, my two favorite indicators, right? And the EMA is nice because it's kind of like the MACD expressed as a price on the actual chart itself. Okay, so it kind of is momentum essentially, right? So it tells you what the momentum is. So if you look back here, this is bullish momentum. Hindsight, of course, easy to identify right now, but this is perfect entry point. See these two solid green bars? That's 30 minutes worth of time on a 15-minute time frame. Those close there, and what happened? The price comes up, comes down, tries to reject, but it bounced off the EMA and continues upwards. So that would have been a perfect example of an entry point right there. Because just say you took entry there roughly and you came up, got out somewhere in this range, that'd be a good 8 to 10% gain, 8 to 10% profit. Again, that's if you're doing more of a short-term time frame, because that is what, maybe 3 hours, but that would be a good 3 hours, honestly, depending on your position, right? So just something to pay attention to. And you could say the same thing here as well. Now, this isn't true confirmation because at this point, had you taken entry, it was below the VWAP line, so it could have rejected. But again, still something to pay attention to because an entry point above EMA is beneficial, but if it's over VWAP, it's even better, right? You want to use them both. You want to take confirmation above both of those indicators. Okay, so again, if you're a risk taker, maybe perhaps consider doing something like this. I never recommend it personally because the VWAP has a tendency of rejecting the price action. But there has been somewhat of a bullish trend here over the last 24 hours since Bitcoin tried to test its most recent low again, right? Somewhere around, what was that, 33,000? It's pretty low. So so that's kind of what I'm saying here. So just big picture, that's kind of what I'd recommend utilizing on this here. I'll say that time and time again in all my charts, but these are my favorite indicators. Another thing to note as well is the RSI. This should be a tertiary indicator. In other words, you use it at the very end of either getting out of position or considering where you're taking entry. So let's just say, for example, right, you took entry right here. Let me go ahead and get in a little further here. So say, for example, you took entry right here. Slightly risky because it's under VWAP, but just say you took entry at that point. Let's see where the RSI is at. So RSI is still in good shape, but see how it peaks up right here, comes back down? Don't worry about that. RSI over 70 isn't a bad thing, okay? People seem to think that they need to get out immediately. It just helps you understand that it's something you want to pay closer attention to, because when the price comes up over 70, it does have a tendency or propensity to return and reject, or essentially come back down, right? The retracement can occur. It doesn't always, but it's more often than not that the RSI will calm down and come back down, or it'll kind of just hover around 70 and eventually taper off. So what I recommend is, instead of just getting out as soon as the RSI comes up over 70, so let's just say, for example, you got out right here where it came up over 70, you would have taken a position right here, or correction, sold your position, right? And you would have netted yourself, and wouldn't be terrible, about 5%. Not bad. I would still be happy with that. You can't be upset with that if you take gains, take profits early, right? That's okay. But what I'd recommend instead is to wait for the RSI to start calming down and coming back down. In other words, as soon as you see the RSI start kind of tapering off and trending back towards 70, just say, for example, in this area here, then that would be a case in point where you'd want to consider either selling or trimming your position. So let's just follow that up here. So this line right here, approximately somewhere in this range, you would have exited your position. So instead of selling only roughly 5%, you now made it a 10% gain. Literally twice as much by waiting for the RSI to start coming back down instead of shooting its way upwards. Okay. So again, I'm a very conservative trader myself personally. I like to kind of adjust in the center, in the middle, because you never truly know when the RSI is going to come back down. But when it does start coming down, that would be a great time to consider exiting your position. Yes, there are times where it can continue to go upwards, right? There are some really strong bull runs you might miss out. But I would say that in crypto, if you're treating this like a business, you always take your profits when you can. It's important to do that, because if you don't, all that money could be gone, right? You're leaving money on the table, meat on the bone, and it's just not ideal. So just some professional advice here, letting you know, in my years of trading, I can tell you that I've learned one thing, and it's to take profits when you can. Crypto has tons of them available. Even in a bear market, you can find profit, okay? So, the whole hodling thing doesn't necessarily always work. If you can steel yourself and use good risk management, this is the right way to go, okay? So that's what I have for you today. Thank you again for watching. I do have a Patreon account if you'd like to show your support. I'm actually going to roll out with a signal group soon, so that will help you identify a good entry point, best practice. I'm going to help a lot of my community because I'm getting a lot of requests for it. So I'm going to have that rolling out soon. It will be my basically my premium membership, but I can tell you that it'll be worthwhile and it'll be very beneficial. So you'll see that here soon, as well as the live streams too. I did a practice live stream this last week and it didn't work so well. I'm ironing out the kinks, I promise. The next week or two I'll have it figured out, and I'll probably just do that. I'll start that with weekends at first, and once I eventually transition to this being a full-time thing, it'll probably become daily, okay? So just be on the lookout for that. But again, thank you so much for your support. You're all very awesome. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I appreciate you watching this long. Hope you have a great rest of your day. See you in the next video. Take care.